All right, cool. So, what's up, guys? So, welcome to our independent symposium. The topic of today is the art of storytelling, how to drive streaming through compelling stories. My name is Ben Willis, co founder of Independent, as well as Indie Pop, which is a music management company. But today we're focusing on Independent, which is our distribution and boutique label offering. And today we have a really good panel of people that I know very well. So what I wanted to do is first just kind of go around the room and everyone can introduce themselves, and then we can kind of really jump into the questions. And I'm really excited about this because I spend a good portion of my days pitching the DSP. So I'm really excited to dig in on this. Yeah, who wants to go first?
I guess I'll kick it off. Akim Bryant here, head of R&B for Pandora. Been there for 2 years and rocking.
You want to go,
Mike? Okay, I'll go. I'm Sam Berger. I'm currently in a music industry consultant, working across marketing, biz dev, streaming, all that kind of stuff, creative as well. Prior to what I'm doing now, I was over at Spotify for 4 years, led one of the artist and label marketing teams in the US. And then before that was an artist manager for a while. It's good to be here.
Cool. My name is Mike Hamilton. I am currently Senior Director of Commerce at Epic Records. I've been there a little over a year, primarily overseeing DSP strategy and partnerships for the R&B hip hop roster. Prior to coming to Epic, I was at Atlantic Records for 5 years.
Great. And so I have, personal relationships. Mike, we worked together at Atlantic Records, and you led on all the DSP stuff for us in the R&B and urban space. And Sam, I communicated directly to you as our label rep and ALM partner from the label side. And now with Akim, who I was introduced by Nicole Johnson, who's also a good friend, I pitch records to. So I think that this is, like I was saying earlier, kind of a good cross genre mix of people that all have a different perspective on sort of like what we do for a living. So I think with that, I'll hop into my first question, and then I can kind of we can either go around or whoever wants to jump in first, whatever. But so to start us off, I think we can all agree that it can be difficult for many artists to stand out of all the social media noise or other artists trying to promote their music online. Yet there's so much value in telling your story in order to grow a fan base and to get people's attention. What are some foundational places, or what are some foundational pieces of information people should know about an artist in order to start building a good story? So in other words, when we start to pitch or when we start a conversation, from your guys' perspective, what do you think is the best way to sort of introduce an artist? Just in general, right? Obviously, we can talk about the DSP space specifically, but in such a vast space where people are pitching music and trying to introduce artists, what do you think is a good place to start? You want to go first, Mike?
Yeah, I think probably the best way is to really, understand that artist's connection to music, right? I think now so many artists break or are elevated through, TikTok or, different social media crazes, trends, all those things. And obviously nothing wrong with those things. I think that we've seen in the last 2 years how social media has drastically helped to amplify artists and amplify what they're doing. But in the middle of all that, I think what has gotten lost is how is this person connected to music? Like what is their connection to music? If that's what we're pitching, if we're trying to get people to playlists and artists, we're trying to get people to invest marketing dollars and advertising dollars into an artist. And, we're telling people, hey, this is why we think you should use your platform to amplify this artist to your consumers, to your users. What makes this artist interesting? Why are they doing music? I think, it's easy to, say, oh, we're getting X amount of views on this video, but that doesn't tell the story. Right. And so I think, it's super important for us to understand the beginning stages. Why is this artist interested? What are, okay, they might sing, they might rap or they might sing R&B, but what other music has inspired them outside of those genres? Kind of getting an understanding, getting a feel for what inspired that artist.
Yeah. And Akeem, from the perspective of being pitched to, what do you find important in a new, and when someone's saying, "Hey, I got this new artist, they're great," and you're like, "All right, cool," because I think that I think, Mike, you're right. Like, what differentiates them from other people? What inspired them to get involved in music? There's a lot of people that can sing, and there's a lot of people that can rap. But like, why should I take stock in this artist? What do you find useful, Akeem, from that perspective?
Yeah, I think just making it clear from the artist's perspective exactly what their reason is. Why are they doing music? What is their motivation behind it? When did they start? One of the biggest questions for me is always, when did they start doing music? I find, especially nowadays, a lot of artists, woke up last week and decided to start making music, and then, they want to be the next Chris Brown or the next Beyonce. And it's like,
Yeah.
those people put in so many years to become who they are. And if you woke up last week and decided to do this, you have a long road ahead of you before you actually get to the point where you're resonating with the audience and resonating with the people that you come into contact with. So
It's such an interesting thing. And I think to ask Sam what you think about this, you've played so many different roles in people's careers. How do you feel? What do you feel about that question, or what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's such an important time in an artist's career. It's like you only get that time to build the foundation once. And so really setting up and setting the stage for who you are and your point of view. Because at the end of the day, with that foundation, what you're building is a community. And that community is what supports you when you have a huge hit or when you don't have a huge hit. They're there by your side no matter what. And so I think the way that that community is formed is based on connecting over like a common belief system. And that belief system could be as broad as like, I like to wear crazy clothes and dye my hair a specific color. Like it doesn't have, and it could also be about religion. It could be about where you're from. I mean, so we've seen so many artists, and this is something that's never gone out of style in music, that have built a community just on a local level first and kind of came out of where they're from. And I know a lot of our favorite artists did that. Young artists are still doing that. So I think you're building a community, and that community is sort of rallying around you and your point of view. And so I'm making sure that that point of view, that sort of like moral code, is understood and visible to your fans from day one.
Yeah, that's super important. I mean, I think if you get the opportunity to build that, and that's tough, right? Because when you're like 18 or 19 years old, I mean, come on, when we were all 18 or 19 years old, we didn't know ourselves. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's another, you add that into the mix. What you stand for at 18 or 19 is definitely going to be different than what you stand for at like 30. So being able to have like a clear description of understanding, I think that we have two specific clients that really from day one understood what they stood for, and that was Kyle and Una. Both of them had a very, very clear picture. Una from a moral standpoint, because she's a Muslim woman in the world, and she knows exactly what she will do and exactly what she won't do, and she is not swayed by money. And Kyle's the same thing, man. I mean, this year has been such a trying year from a management perspective, because you're looking for alternative ways to create revenue. But how do you help create alternative ways of revenue for artists that have already made millions of dollars and aren't motivated by money? That is like a really trippy position to be in, because I'm like, hey guys, we have this like phenomenal social media following. Would you want to maybe potentially do the brand post? And it's like, if I'm not in sync or in line with the brand, now I'm not going to do the post. And no, 10,000, 20 or 30 or $100,000 isn't going to sway me. And that's also just another interesting place to be. But I think that if you live and die by that, then people will, to speak to your point, Sam, know exactly what you stand for. And you sort of set those boundaries, and your fans know what they've actually bought into. You know what I'm saying?
Also, too, yeah. I think it's important to understand that whoever you're pitching to is also a fan of music. I know I got into music because I absolutely love music, and I like real artists. I like artists who take their time with their art, and they're very intentional about what they want to say. And I think it's important to understand that the person that you're pitching to has that perspective, and therefore you need to understand that you need to appeal to that and appeal to it as if you're talking to your audience directly. So
yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing that you just said. I think that, like, from the perspective of, and Mike, you can probably really feel this. Like, when you're pitching to specific editors, sometimes there's this thing that gets lost in translation. Like, is the editor even into music? You know what I mean? Because you feel like you need to get back what you're giving out, right? So from our perspective, we're giving out something, we're super excited. But I was speaking to a friend at Apple Music about, maybe a couple months ago, and she was saying that, like, regardless of what goes on in the world, what's being pitched, her favorite thing is still discovering new music. And I think that's what it's supposed to be at the heart and soul of it. I mean, like, obviously for me, as someone who helps create careers for people, I love breaking in new artists. It's my favorite thing in the world, whether that's because that feeds my ego to say that I was right, or it's just helping understand that what you're doing is helping someone else's career, but you are right about doing that. Because, I mean, think about it, man. Like, there's so many artists trying to become successful, and if you can continue to have a track record of breaking artists, that's a phenomenal thing. And I think being able to communicate that information that's the most important thing. So that takes me to my next question, which is to dig even deeper into what a good story should entail. What are ways that artists can continue to build that narrative or connection with their audience that goes beyond just a single or an album? And what do you think about that, Mike?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. I guess that's what social media is for now, right? I mean, you can find ways to tap into your audience directly, whether it's about a single, an album, a project, whatever, you can speak directly to your fans. So I do think that is one of the positives, one of the upsides of having social media, is that you can speak directly to people. And it doesn't always have to be about music. I mean, and granted, I think she's probably the best example of this, but we look at what Cardi B has done. Like, she's probably the most accurate example of someone who has social media wrapped around her finger. She knows how to use it. And, she doesn't always have to be selling a project or a single or a product or, anything. She can just tap into her fan base and people want to hear what she has to say. So I think that, and I think also on the flip side, I think on the negative end too, is that, you do have some artists who really are just artists. And so the social media aspect is not a strong suit for them. So I do think it's a rare catch-22, because I do think that some artists really just want to be artists. And so in this climate, I think you kind of, it's a great question. How do you do that? Particularly if you're the artist that just wants to be the artist, how do you do that? Because, I'm 30. When artists I was going to listen to, were coming out, we watched them on TV. Yeah. And we watched them on TV. We, read about them in magazines. I think back then, the message boards, that was the message board era too. So like, you would go on your favorite message boards and you would read about your favorite artists. But that was, and even then, the artists weren't active on the message boards. You just kind of learned more about them, by interacting with other fans that way. But that was all the access you had. And so the artist could be the artist, when they had to go on TRL or 106 & Park, they were working, and that was all we saw. And I think now a lot of, I think there's two different sides. I think that there are artists who really are artists and they don't really care about that stuff, and they just really want to get their music out there. But then they're being told on the flip side, your music is good, but you got to get more followers, you got to get more engagement. And it's like, that's frustrating, but I just want to be an artist. But on the flip side, you do have some artists who actually are really good at leveraging that. And so I think the real challenge is for the artists that aren't really into social media, aren't really into using that tool. How do they find their fan base? And in a time like COVID, I think that that's increasingly difficult, because the other way to do that has always been live shows. And right now we don't have live shows. So, maybe that's the way you tap in. Maybe you are, your fans know every once a week I can come to your Instagram live. You're going to do some sort of acoustic, session at home, or some sort of freestyle moment at home, once every week, once every other week, like just finding creative ways to do it.
Yeah, it's just about how you come across to other people. And we get these little snapshots in people's lives of who they are, but we don't really know, once you pull that curtain back, who they really are. And I think to your point, Mike, like when someone knows how to have, when someone has that voice, like, and can speak and can come across on social media and feel very comfortable, that's kind of a win. But the biggest part is finding the artists that can't find their voice, and they truly are, they just want to write songs, right? They just want to write songs and they want to perform them. And they're so cringe on social media. And you're just like, you put the spotlight on them and they feel like they have to be something that they're not. And they just need to be themselves. You know what I mean? I think that's,
and I feel really bad for them. I feel really bad for those types of artists, because there's some of my favorite artists, they never say or tweet anything, but they make great music, and so I enjoy the music. Yeah. But they also came up in a time where they didn't have to do all of that. They just had to go to work when they needed to, and then if they were a douche behind the scenes, we never knew about it, and it didn't matter.
Akim, what do you think about that? Like when, you know, I mean, this might be kind of a prying question, but obviously from an editorial standpoint, you're programming music that you love, that you think is going to work. And then from there, right, we allow the fans and the algorithm to kind of tell us if this works or not. Do you ever program based upon like, this person is super poppin', the song's kind of mediocre, but it'll probably do well on the platform? Are there, what is the threshold where you're like, okay, what if Cardi B does put out a song that's kind of average, you know what I mean? But you kind of got to fill that quota to put it in. And I hope that's not like too much of a Brian question, but it's an interesting one, because I guess it's just like anything else. You want to see if it's going to work, but where does that sort of like the art get lost with the actual forward-facing character that the artist may or may not be, you know?
Yeah, it's a valid question. And one of the things that for me, my baseline is about the music. So it has to be at least good enough to be added into airplay.
Yeah.
So that, and then I kind of determine based off of the level of the artist. So, you know, if we're talking about a B-level artist who has a new song that's not that great, then I'm going to put it in on some level just to give it some airplay and see how the audience responds before I decide to amplify it and, you know, boost it up in rotation. Whereas if it's a brand new artist coming in and they just have a song that's just enough to get in, that's likely not going to be enough for the audience to respond, and the audience to then latch on to the music and decide that this is something that they want to listen to on a regular basis. So yeah, it's a lot of kind of teetering between their, you know, popularity essentially and the music itself. But to Mike's point, I think to everybody's point, everything begins and ends with the music as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So even if it's it was an artist last week, I'm not going to name them, but they came out with a song that was just not very good.
Yeah.
So I put it in the bare minimum places, you know, for their audience to find the song, but not necessarily in the best position for the entire audience to hear the song. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, what I'll do is if it's a brand new artist who has an amazing song, I will put that in every place I can possibly find, just to give them a leg up so that we can get more good music in the space as opposed to just helping people's popularity.
Right. I think that like, and this sort of, I think, you know, can transition over to Sam. Like, you know, there are a lot of songs that are decent, good, in between great. And I think what I love about where we're at with technology now is we kind of learn pretty quickly if something is good or not. In my days of coming up in the music business, I started as a radio promoter. So that was in the late 90s, you know? So like you could be $100,000 to $150,000 in on a campaign before you even figured out if you had anything. You know what I mean? Like you would spend the whole budget, the whole radio budget. And that was like the prerequisite to figuring out if you had a song or not. So you start, you know, depending upon the format of the song, you start at like mix show and then go to programming and set an ad date. And you'd be, you know, you need at least sometimes 8, 12 to 16 weeks at radio and continuing to fund radio and continuing to do the things you have to do to figure out if you're going to have success. And that's a lot of time and effort and money. Sam, what do you think about, where we're at now and being able to really look into the algorithm and really trying to figure out if a song is working or not? Do you feel like do you think that today it's too fast, or that sometimes things need more time to resonate? You know what I mean? What do you think about that idea or that concept?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that any of us face and any artist faces is time. And I think it's probably the least understood concept, especially right now in the music industry, because some of the biggest success stories, some of the biggest victories over the last few years were songs that came out 3 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, you see like all the incredible success Lizzo's had on records. I mean, Mike, you were in the building. Like those were songs that came out years before they started to blow up. And then you have this like moment right now on TikTok with, this guy on, a skateboard drinking cranberry juice, listening to Fleetwood Mac. And it's like, Fleetwood Mac didn't put a dime into this campaign, and all of a sudden their streams are up, exponentially. So you never know like when that moment is going to come. And you just have to be ready for it. I think what's incredible about Lizzo is that she was probably one of the hardest working artists that that you could probably point to over the last 5 years or so, probably even more. And with Lizzo, like she just didn't stop. And then that way, when she got the spotlight, she was so ready for it, and she was incredible live. She was like so confident in herself and her voice, and could give an acceptance speech at the Grammys that would make everyone cry. Like most artists aren't ready for that, but she had the practice. And so I think like timing is critical in terms of like setting up a plan. You want to follow the rules. You want to look at it, and you don't want to rush anything out, and you want to make sure you're not looking back at your launch and going, man, if I had more time, I would have done X, or if I would have timed this out better, maybe we would have seen more success. I should have sent that email to Akim earlier. Like all that kind of stuff. Like you want to dial that in, but at the end of the day, once it's out into the world, we almost let it go and let it loose. And a kid in, Vermont might put it in a TikTok, and that sparks, something crazy that then changes your entire plan. So I think it's like, before you put it out, have a good plan in place, like really think about the timing, think about your rollout. But I think the beauty of music being so digital right now is that you can be fluid. So if something's starting to catch fire, like you didn't anticipate, like maybe you adjust your schedule accordingly and hold off on, maybe accidentally cannibalizing the success that your current record's having that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think to that point, I think a lot of the industry has gotten spoiled by hip hop, because I think with hip hop, everything reacts so swiftly.
Yeah.
But in most other genres, you really, to Sam's point, have to give things time. I mean, I'm working an R&B record right now that we put out in November.
Yeah, dude, seriously.
It is now October. That record is streaming nearly 4 million times a week. It was not doing that. It was not doing that last November when we put it out. And so, R&B in particular is a genre where you really have to wait it out, and you just keep fanning the flames. Sure, it may not be working right away. Okay, it may not work. Or if you keep fanning the flames, maybe it does work. Like you just don't know. And I think, I think it depends on the artist. I think pop music is another example too. You really have to give things time. R&B, you have to give things time. I think country music, you have to give it time. There are certain genres. I think hip hop might be the only exception where you can read it after 2 weeks, and if it's not working, then it's not working. I think other genres, you really have to be patient. You can't give up so quickly. You can't, even with pitching playlists, I have to tell artists and managers all the time, like, just because you don't get playlists right out the gate does not mean that you can't get on playlists eventually. I think that's the other thing too. It's like playlisting. There's such an instantaneous, every Friday, it's like everyone, everybody in the industry is refreshing, they're refreshing Pandora, Apple, Spotify, everybody's refreshing every single playlist on every single platform. and by 8 a.m., you're getting distraught texts and emails because people didn't see their song on a playlist. And it's like, okay, but that's not the end all be all. Playlisting is not marketing. I have to tell people that all the time. Like, your whole entire marketing plan should not be to land on this playlist, because once you land on the playlist, then what's the next goal? I think that's the other thing. So I always ask people, we get the playlist, you've been wanting playlists, we get the playlist, fantastic. What is the next step?
Yeah.
If the only end goal was to get a playlist, you didn't do a bigger job setting this up.
Dude, that's like such an interesting thing. I mean, we've even had those conversations directly, you know what I'm saying? When we were at Atlantic, like that's such a trip, man. I feel like, you know, you're right. It's sort of like when you get the light shined on you, then what are you going to do? I almost feel like artists should just continue as if there is no playlist. You know what I mean? And continue to speak to their fans, continue to market however they market. And look, the playlisting is going to come around when the playlisting comes around. I mean, obviously we all wanted at the time that we wanted, but yeah, I also, you know, won $1 million tomorrow too. You know what I mean? So like the reality is it might not come tomorrow. It might come in 2 weeks, but you know, I think we have to continue to, you know, take a look at the genre of music. R&B is like painstakingly slow. Painstakingly slow. And it just is, it is what it is for whatever reason that is. And we have a couple of artists that sit right in that space, and you're just like, you know, it's funny. It's my girlfriend manages Jasmine Sullivan, and like, you know, like,
oh, one of my favorites.
She's like, and we like have these like funny competitions where like Jasmine like dropped her single a week before Una dropped her single, and like she got 1 million streams like the first week, and I was like, all right, cool, we're gonna bust that, and we got like 500,000 streams. I'm like, oh my god, you know, our career, our lives are over, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, it's true, man. I mean, you know, rap music is interesting because you live and die with a really quick time. And you know, the other stuff I kind of like because you do get to work it and you do get a chance to really go in on it. And I also think that when you're working other genres of music, you have the opportunity to spread these songs across all different types of playlists, whether it's a mood playlist or alternative R&B playlist, or you know what I mean. So those are like pretty. That's like a really interesting place to be in. So this sort of takes me to my next question, which is streaming services are constantly refining their algorithms and data science to serve up personalized playlists based upon context, mood, and even timing of the track. Do you think the real power of an artist's success is now in the hands of the listeners and what they want? And I can answer that question, but I mean, I think it's yes, but what do you think about that, Sam?
So I think yes and no. And I think yes, because, you know, I think there's a lot of really great things about algorithmic curation, and especially when there's just so much music coming out. You know, if you know, like all of us, we love discovering new music. It's like finding a needle in the haystack, but when, you know, the haystack can be a little bit smaller and presented to you, I think that's like, you know, incredibly useful. But I do think that, you know, kind of something you guys all touched on was that a lot of artists now seem to aspire to achieve overnight success or achieve success as fast as they can because they saw another artist do it or because they saw their friend do it. And where I think like the biggest kind of mistake or just misunderstanding about all of this is that, you know, algorithms are great if you're prepared. Like if you're like, I think kind of Akim, kind of what you were saying, or Mike, like, you know, if you're ready, if you're prepared for success, and you know, your song gets added to a playlist, and you know, algorithmic playlists can kind of help a song move into more editorial properties and things like that. But if you're not ready for it, there's no way to like pour gas on that fire. It kind of, it ends quickly, and it doesn't, you're not able to always maximize what comes of the opportunity. So, you know, to me, I think the most important thing before any of all this is to just make great records. And, you know, a lot of artists will make records for algorithms. They're like, this song would be like great, you know, to put on when you're, you know, going to sleep. And I want to make sleep music because I think that that's going to stream really well. And but the artists themselves doesn't really like sleep music. It's not really something they're passionate about. It's just a way to kind of like work the algorithm, work the system. So for me, it's like, make great records and trust in the fact that like you're being as authentic as you possibly can and making great music, and the rest will kind of like work itself out. It may not happen overnight, but at least you can go to bed knowing that you're authentic and you're putting your most authentic self out there, and you've focused on music. Like you are a musician, like make great music. Like that to me is the top.
Yeah. I agree with that. I kind of feel like, but that's like in anything in life, right? Like if you put your whole self into it and you are doing something for all the right reasons, it seems to sort of come back. Like I said, it might not be the timeline that you want, but you sort of get out of it what you put into it. And I do believe that, like, I don't think I've ever really had any of our clients yet come to me like, hey, I made this song because I think it works really good in this playlist. I think I would be really disappointed in that person, just because it's like, all right, well, what are we doing then? You know what I mean? Because,
Right.
like, if we're just manufacturing music for playlists, and I think it's time for
we've hit an all-time low.
We
would have hit an all-time low if that's what we're doing.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Because then it would just be like, all right, I think kind of like what we all got into music for is now like
not it.
It's like it's just like that's and I think Sam, to say what you said, man, like, or to touch on what you said, like, first and foremost, it should be about the song, right? Like, we were talking about, one of our clients was talking about how to take their career to the next level, and he's had some really great success in where he's at, but it's about like taking the success from here. Like, how do you take? I have two of our clients that I've talked to in the past couple of weeks where they make great money, they've had hit records, but now what's the next level of success, right? Like, how do you achieve the next level of success? And for one of them, he said, I think that if I could take my music from where I'm at now, go to the next level, and that next level is that people look at me as a real musician. People look at me and come to me and say, wow, you actually so you did this genre, you had the success, but now you've totally changed that. And now you have this sound that people look at as like, you're not someone that just sits at a computer and like writes in the piano scroll and makes records like that, but someone that's looked at as a real musician. And I think that's probably the ultimate goal for everybody. Everyone wants to be revered as someone that wrote hit songs or wrote really, really great songs. I mean, there's the documentary on Dolly Parton right now on Netflix where she just, she talks about, it starts with the song first for her. And also that every single song that she's ever written, she leaves a piece of herself in that song. And she's written hundreds of songs. So think about that, man. That's like such a deep concept. And I think, man, the song process and really writing stuff that resonates, good, bad, or indifferent, is kind of where it needs to start. And then I think everything else kind of goes from there. You know what I mean?
And also too, I think, we're at a point in music history where essentially it's all been done before. Like, find who your favorite, everybody has their favorite artist, figure out what their journey was like and what it took for them to get to where they are and to becoming your favorite artist of all time. And then also too, I think it's about the evolution of being an artist. Who you are when you first start your career is not who you should be in 5-10 years down the road. Like, your music needs to evolve, but also too, I find that nowadays too many new artists are too quick to evolve, where they go from one project to the next and it's a completely different sound, and the next project is a completely different sound, and they don't understand it. Every time that you change that sound so drastically, you abandon the audience that you had. So now you have to build a new one every single time that you put out new music. And that's defeating the purpose of being who you ultimately want to become, or at least who you should be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I had a client early on in indie pop's career where she had a bunch of hit records, and she was like, okay, for this next project, I really want to sort of change the direction. And I was like, but if you change the direction too drastically, you're going to abandon your fan base. And she didn't understand that concept. You know, that really speaks to sometimes when you're not a songwriter and someone writes you a song that becomes a hit, you better be okay with that being your persona, because people are going to want you to sing that fucking song until you're 50.
All the time.
You know what I'm
All the
saying?
time. And I think that's the great thing about the artists now too. I think artists have a level of autonomy that a lot of the older artists didn't. I mean, how often now do we hear artists that we grew up listening to say in some interview, after 30 years after they did a song, oh, I hated that song. And it's like, are you serious? Like, you hate it? Like, that's like your biggest hit. But like you said, if when someone else writes a song for you and it becomes a hit, you better be comfortable singing it, because it's going to make you a shit ton of money. Everyone's going to want to hear it. And whether or not you like that song, people are going to gravitate towards it. They're going to always want to hear you do it. And I think that that is one of the great things about being an artist now, is that a lot of the creative process, you know, I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting in meetings and people are like, you know, we're putting a song out just because the artist wants it out. I don't know that it was like that. I mean, I haven't been in the industry too long. I don't know if it was like that. And
it wasn't like that
companies. And 10 years ago, you know, if a executive didn't like a song, it may not end up on the album. Whereas now we're putting songs out because, hey, management hit us and said the artist wants a song out. I was like, all right, well, the artist wants a song out. You know, we're gonna back the artist and support what they want to do. And I think that that's something, you know, artists should take advantage of. But at the same time, to Akim's point, like, you really have to, when you have the autonomy, you have to use it very wisely, because if you shift your sound too quickly, you know, if I love the first project, but this second project sounds completely different, you know, I don't know. And you know, I mean, I hate to keep using big artists as examples, but we use them as frameworks for a reason. I mean, Beyonce's first 3 albums, they literally followed a formula. They followed a very similar formula. She got to album number 4, and those last 3 studio albums that she's done, they don't follow the hit maker playbook. She completely abandoned like the whole idea of a radio hit first. And, oh, I have to go top 10 here and then put that. Like, she's like, I'm doing what I want to do, but she established her fan base. And so now everybody, hey, I may not want to hear you sing a song with a banjo in the background, but because you're Beyonce and I've been listening to you for 15 years, listen to it. I'll play it, I'll listen to it. And maybe I might like it. Or even if I don't like it, hey, you're still Beyonce and, you know, you're one of my favorite artists. So, she established a sound where her fan base could be loyal. And then no matter what direction she takes, people are going to be interested enough to follow it. And you have to, when artists have the level of autonomy now that she probably didn't have when she started. So you have to be that's a power, an artistic power that you have to be very careful with.
And also, like, I kind of feel like, you know, an interesting thing is, like, as you're an artist, and say if you get in the game and you're like 18 years old and you establish yourself and you start having hit records, you know, your fans are probably 14, 15, 16, 17 too. So like, as you grow in age, your fan base grows with you. So what they wanted when they were 17, they don't want it 25 and 30. And I think being very conscious of that is super, super, super important, because we do want to see our favorite artists grow. I mean, Kanye West did that. You know, it took him 3 or 4 albums, but after he got on that 4th album, he started getting super weird and super experimental. Some people hated on it, so he lost fans, but a lot of people loved
But those first 3 albums established him. Those first 3 albums were consistent. And when he started pivoting, it was like, all right, I may not like it, but hey,
we'll go with you. Like,
we'll go with it. We'll go with you on it. You know, Kanye, another great example of somebody who first 3 albums, he was very, you know, he stayed in that lane, and he held in a fan base. Like, and now every direction he's gone in, people follow it, whether they like it or not. They follow it.
Yeah, I mean,
and I also think it's worth noting that, like, all of these examples we're giving are albums, you know, and it's like, when you think about like the building blocks of an artist's career, it's like we look back at albums. I think, you know, we're in such a singles driven industry right now that, you know, when you think about the fact that like Beyonce or Kanye, they made like 3 albums that were really consistent, you knew what to expect. You know, you could say the same thing about like Taylor Swift, you know, like there's so many like massive artists. But like if those artists had put out 3 singles and then pivoted and done something completely different, it would have worked against them for sure. It would have been this thing we're talking about where it's like, you know, those are 36 songs or more we're talking about of consistent, you know, sort of identity building pieces of art. And, you know, when you think about what people are listening to and how people consume music, like if you're putting out a bunch of singles, you also have to consider the fact that like those consumers are listening to a lot of other things too. So if you're starting to pivot in a weird direction after single 2 or 3 or whatever, a lot of that consistency is lost. I think the biggest, most important thing though, and like I can't stress this enough, I just think is authenticity. I think like just because someone set you up in a session and it was like a big name writer, a big name producer, if the song's not you and you don't like it, then you got to stay true. You know, that might be true to yourself. I think it's a hard conversation to have, especially if you're signed to an Epic Records or whatever, and you don't want to come off as ungrateful for the opportunity to be signed there, or working with a manager like yourself, Ben. It's like, you know, those are hard conversations to have. But I think at the end of the day, it's really important for artists to hold as much of that integrity, and they owe it to themselves to be as authentic as possible.
And I mean, from that point of view, you know, from my perspective, if, you know, if you're a management client or a label client, if you do stand your ground and show us early on, like, this is what I'm about, then we honor that. If you flip-flop hella times and I'm like, okay, if I can talk to this person by the 5th time I tell them I think they should do it, they'll do it, then I'm going to take advantage of that, because my job is to kind of help guide them through their career. But like, ultimately, you know, if you put your, you put your foot down and you're like, look, that's not me. And just because, you know, Ty Dolla $ign penned a record, it might not be for me, even though he's had millions and millions of hits. You know what I mean? So like, I think it's really, really, I think it is important to stay true to yourself and in what you do, and really paint a really good picture. And, you know, ultimately, I think continuing to give information where people buy into and staying true to yourself really helps you become really successful. And just consistency too. I mean, I tell our clients all the time, like, you know, if I go to Akim and I'm like, hey, so I have this artist, they're dropping a record next month, and you're like, all right, cool, well, what's the plan? I'm like, well, I'm not really too sure what the plan is after this first song, versus like, here's the first single, here's the second single, here's when the project comes out. Then at least if you're going to buy into that artist, you know, there's consistency that you're buying into, and that both of us on both ends of the spectrum are really pushing to make this artist successful. And I think that's the other thing. If you woke up yesterday and you want to become Beyonce, it's not going to happen, because you need years and years of consistency for people to really buy into you as an artist. So,
but also too, I think it's important as an artist to, because no one knows everything. No one is going to be able to have the foresight to know what exactly is going to be a hit. I know some of my favorite artists of all time, Whitney Houston is one of them. She didn't love every single song that she sang, you know, but she also trusted the people involved in the process enough to do what they needed to do, to just come in. She recorded the song. Okay, I think All at Once was one of those songs. And yeah, she came in, she recorded it. Okay, I did what you needed me to do. Now you guys do what y'all need, what you all need to do with the project. And, you know, the next thing you know, it becomes a #1 hit. And it's like, oh shit, like now I have to spend the rest of my career actually performing this song that I really don't like.
Yeah.
So I think it's being nimble enough to understand that this is all part of creativity, and no one knows at the end of the day what is going to be the result. But if everybody is in it for all the same reasons, then it should work out in the end for everybody.
I agree. It's that energetic chain. If there's one negative energetic part of that chain, the whole thing collapses. Yeah. Really, like when they say the sun, the moon, and the stars all aligned and like this became a hit. No, it's because everyone that was involved believed so passionately. And that, I think that like gives off. I think that gives off to the people around them. You know what I mean? Like if I'm over here saying, I love this song, And then, you know, Josh is saying he loves the song, but Gabe's like, I hate the song. Well, then that third link in the chain just fucked it all up for us. You know what I mean? And so it's a very rare time when you have everyone just like that. You know what I mean? So anyway, well, thank you guys for chatting today. Like, I really appreciate it. This is, I've been moderating some of these things, and this is the one that I was really looking forward to because I love, you know, I've had an extensive career in like promoting. I started out as a radio promoter, and then to end up here back doing DSP promotions is something that I feel really comfortable doing. But as it evolves, it's really interesting to see that what remains the same is a hit song and is a good song and is a song that sort of evokes emotion. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for today, and I really appreciate it. And then I look forward to seeing you guys in the real world soon, you know?
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Peace.